Hi, human development students. Today we're going to be covering roles and relationships in early adulthood, and this is the last topic before our second exam. In your syllabus, roles and relationships were considered two different topics on two different days, but for multiple reasons, I decided to combine them into one lecture. It makes it easier for you and for me, but also our roles can also be our relationships, or our relationships can be our roles. So, for example, today we're going to be talking about parenthood, and that's both reflecting a relationship with a child, let's say, and also a role, like I am a mother, I am a father. So for those reasons, the two topics are combined into one. So let's get started. So the plan for today's lecture is to talk about relationships broadly. Basically, how do we go about finding a mate or a partner, and who is right for us or not right for us. Then we'll talk about marriage, divorce, and parenthood. And when we get to parenthood, we'll focus on parenthood broadly, but then we'll focus on motherhood and fatherhood separately. So, there's been quite a bit of research on mate selection. So, essentially, what kind of mates are the ones that we want? What kinds of skills or traits or just individual differences are most desirable? Obviously, there are lots of individual differences in our own preferences. We all don't like the same kinds of things in the same partners, but we can look at it broadly to see at a group level what are the most desired traits, or again, or skills or attributes that people are looking for in a potential romantic partner. I know the data here comes from 1996, which is quite old. Even I was very young at this time. Um, but the idea here is that there was a research project done looking at both males and females reported, I guess, like favorite attributes or the importance of various traits. And this only represents one sample, so it's not that I want you to remember and know for the exam, these 18 in this order. So we're just going to look at overall patterns. If we were in class, I would give you your own sheet of these 18 and ask you to rank them to see how you would rank them compared to this average score. Again, from 1996. And we could definitely question if data from 1996 would look similar or different today compared to if we had a study done in 2020 asking, to rate the importance of various traits, would this look the same? So, when we look at just men's, you see that the top, let's say top five, we have mutual attraction is ranked as number one as an important trait in a potential partner, a person who's dependable, who has emotional stability and maturity, a pleasing disposition, which generally means like nice or sweet, and then good health. At the bottom, we see, let's start with number 15, for example, that it's less important to have favorable social status or rating, less favorable for men to have a partner with a virgin status or somebody who's pretty chaste, a person who has similar religious or political backgrounds. When I present this in class, typically I ask students to think about how women's scores would look different or similar to these men's scores. And obviously you see the results up on the right. So it's not a surprise to you, but you see that the top four are actually the same. So for women, again, the most desirable traits in selecting a mate or in a potential mate include that mutual attraction and love, dependable character, emotional stability, maturity, and pleasing disposition. You'll see some differences between men's and women's in that whole list overall, but the top four are pretty similar. And also the bottom four are pretty similar. Obviously for women, it says that as number 15, being a good cook and housekeeper is less important than men said. Nevertheless, this is just, again, one study that was done, but a study that actually made a mark on history in the sense of shaping our understanding of mate selection. Do these things look the same in 2020? I'm not sure when the last time a study on this exactly took place, but we could definitely question that. I imagine that many of these things would still stay in the similar rank order today. As you can imagine, there have been many, many attempts to study love and mate selection throughout history, not necessarily even coming from an empirical or scientific perspective. And so there are many different theories and approaches that one can take. I'm going to talk about some contemporary looks at love and romantic attachment or romantic relationships in just a second, but I wanted to focus first on a theory that also made a splash in psychological research and also, again, just like from a theoretical perspective. And so this is more of a traditional view on love, the classic study, Merstein's stimulus value role theory. This is coming from like the 1970s, so yes, it is pretty dated. But the idea here isn't necessarily far-fetched and can apply definitely to some of our relationships. Essentially, what this theory is stating is that mate selection is a three-phase process, which you see on this slide. So the first phase is called the stimulus phase. And essentially what's happening here is that you see a potential partner. Let's say that this is somebody in your dorm, or it's somebody at a party, or it's somebody who is in the cafeteria. I'm trying to apply this to your lives right now. Um, Maybe we can even apply it to Tinder or other online dating apps. But first, let's just talk about it in person because that's what would have happened in the 1970s. So you see this potential partner and you make your first decision. Essentially, could this be a good choice for me? And related to that is, could this be a good choice for me, is would this person want me? This is all based on a very superficial assessment. Perhaps you're looking to see if that person is similarly as attractive to you. Perhaps you're looking to see if, again, maybe if they're older, if that person is wearing a wedding ring. But it is really superficial. At this point, it's not like I know that much about this person and I'm questioning whether, their values fit with mine, because that's going to be the next phase. It's just this pretty superficial choice. But it's necessary because you want to first evaluate, should I even go further? Can I consider this person anymore? Like, is it somebody that should I kind of go after them? So the next phase is called the value comparison phase, and this is basically once you're dating. So it's assuming that the stimulus phase, like you made an accurate judgment in saying that would this person want me, and the answer is yes. So let's say that you're dating, and dating can be defined in a lot of ways. This doesn't mean like serious necessarily, but actually spending time with that person. At this point, you question, does this person match my interests, traits, qualities, way of life? So starting to determine, like, is this somebody that I could actually see myself with for a longer period of time? Do they match me on a deeper level? And then if the answer to that is yes, then you go on to the role phase where you start to work out shared lives. And this doesn't necessarily have to be married. This is just more of a very significant relationship where you could actually see it staying together and or going places. So let's talk about more about this theory and how it actually describes some of our pairings in terms of our romantic partners. Okay, so going along with that theory, think about how it affects your views and attitudes when you see two people that don't seem to fit well with one another. So, for example, if you see a very older person and a real younger person, and you're like, why are they together? Like, it doesn't make sense. Why doesn't it make sense? It doesn't make sense because you're looking at that from like the stimulus phase perspective. This idea that people should be looking for, again, and maybe it's superficial, but does this person fit with me? Just broadly, the superficial assessment. when you do see people fit well together, let's say you have the best looking girl and the star football player, and in this way, the star football player doesn't have to necessarily be the most attractive, but he has prestige in other ways of being the star, then you're like, oh, that just makes sense. It makes sense because you have determined, maybe from stereotypes or previous attitudes or whatever it may be, that those people just seem to fit together. But again, going back to that mismatch, when you have the mismatch, then you start to question and we look for reasons to explain it. Maybe it's one of those things where you see this handsome lawyer and you're just automatically assuming, well, if he's with a woman who is older and unattractive, then he must have low self-esteem. You know that this happens. Maybe you don't do it, but you're aware of other people who do. But again, it goes back to this idea of this stimulus phase that just superficially people in your mind are supposed to look like they fit together. It's superficial, yes, right? It doesn't explain the whole picture, but we do this as humans. Merstein argues that opposites do not attract. And essentially, this is promoted by the need to have partners who mesh with our families. It just makes life easier. But what he would argue is that someone who is similar to our ideal self is best. So if we are partners with somebody who actually brings out the best in us, who actually makes us more like the person we want to be, and so somebody that maybe lets us grow into our ideal, then this is going to be better for us long term. So, just in general, the research does support this. So even though this was a theory coming from 1970 or the 70s, research today generally does support that people who are our partners who are more similar to us are actually going to lead us to have better relationships. When we look at happiness among long married couples, generally similar is better. So this isn't just Merstein's ideas, but research that has come subsequently. However, there's one really interesting finding, and that is that there is this trait of dominance where we do see opposites actually getting along better than if we were similar. And here's why. If you have two dominant people, what's going to happen? And I'm going more extreme dominance. You're gonna butt heads, right? Because you're both stubborn or again just using the word dominant, wanting to have your voice heard. And so like there's gonna be a lot of head butting. Similarly, if you have two submissive people, then there could be issues as well because no one wants to step up or take charge, or they don't really care about taking charge. And it's one of those things like, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? So when we see couples that have at least a person who's higher in dominance, maybe not extreme, and some that are higher in submissiveness, maybe not extreme still, but some variance there, that actually is really good for relationships.